Greetings, Remnant, online friends, and those who just stumbled in here. I'm Pastor John Widdifield. Welcome to the Midweek Refuel, where we seek out the ancient wisdom, simply because modern wisdom celebrates victimhood. And that is truly pathetic. Not weak, not confused, pathetic. Because a culture that teaches you to be a victim is a culture that strips you of responsibility, strips you of courage, and eventually strips you of meaning. And tonight, we're going to light that lie on fire, because Chesterton is about to tell us something so simple, so devastating, that it exposes the modern mindset. And before you can fix the world, you have to decide whether you love it or not. And I have watched in my own lifetime the sentiment towards suicide drift. And it's drifted from an abhorrent sin to an understandable choice. Not debated, not resisted, normalized. That shift didn't happen by accident. It happened because we lost the oath. Because once a culture stops believing that existence itself is sacred, it will eventually conclude that existence itself is optional. Chesterton saw this coming over 100 years ago. He says the person committing suicide, doesn't just reject his life, he rejects life itself. He doesn't just step out of the pain, he steps out of the meaning. And we don't even call it what it is anymore. We no longer call it cowardice. We crown it with language. We wrap it in sympathy. We protect it from criticism because it might hurt somebody's feelings. And we publicly validate the decision as if it were something brave. Now hear me carefully. Compassion for suffering is right, is good, is correct. Walking with people in darkness is right, good, and correct. But there is a line in the sand, and when compassion stops telling the truth, it stops being compassion. Because if the final answer to suffering is escape, then suffering wins. If the final answer to pain is annihilation, meaning loses. Chesterton saw exactly this. The martyr dies for something greater than himself. The suicide dies because nothing is greater than himself. We live in a culture that is becoming increasingly comfortable with death. Not always openly, not always violently, but quietly, systematically, and often under the language of compassion. We justify the ending of life, whether at its beginning or at its end, as a solution to suffering, as a solution to inconvenience or autonomy. We surround ourselves with constant apocalyptic expectation. These are the patterns of a death cult, folks. We surround ourselves with constant apocalyptic expectation, pandemic, environmental crisis, existential crisis, as if the world itself is always on the edge of extinction. We experiment with identity, with spirit, and transcendence through modern spiritualities, self-defined identities, and practices that honestly attempt to reshape what it means to be human. And all of it is enforced and reinforced by something much deeper, a cultural environment where language is constantly reshaped, where definitions shift daily, and where people are told that what they see is not what they see. But on the other side of the fence, we have something just as dangerous, the worthless optimist. The one who says, it's not that bad, everything's fine, just be kind, don't judge. The one who refuses to see corruption at all, because seeing it would require confronting it. And in the church, that shows up as feckless churches entertaining the goats, churches that avoid hard truth, soften clear doctrine, replace transformation with affirmation. The pessimist says nothing is worth saving. The optimist says nothing needs saving. One abandons the world, the other excuses it. One destroys meaning, the other refuses to defend meaning. Chesterton says both are wrong, dead wrong, because both refuse the oath. So if both of those paths fail, the pessimist who abandons the world and the optimist who excuses the world, then what's left? What does it actually look like to love the world rightly without surrendering to it? To fight it without despising it? Chesterton doesn't answer that with a system. He answers it with something far more dangerous. A posture. A way of standing in the world. And this is where he turns the corner, because what he's about to say explains everything that we've just exposed. Listen carefully, because this is the foundation. And before we go to the text, let me ask you for something, just for a moment. If this message matters to you, help get it past the algorithm. Share it. Like it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it today. Because the kind of truth that we're talking about today doesn't get pushed by the algorithm. It gets buried by the algorithm. And the only way it spreads is if people like you and me decide it's worth passing on. And if you have a copy of Orthodoxy, go ahead and open it and prepare to hear from the teacher. Had come to be my position about all that was called optimism, pessimism, and improvement. Before any cosmic act of reform, we must have a cosmic oath of allegiance. A man must be interested in life, then he could be disinterested in his views of it. My son, give me thy heart. The heart must be fixed on the right thing. The moment we have a fixed heart, we have a free hand. I must pause to anticipate the obvious criticism. It will be said that a rational person accepts the world as mixed of good and evil with a decent satisfaction and a decent endurance. But this is exactly the attitude which I maintain to be defective. It is, I know, very common in this age. It was perfectly put in those quiet lines of Matthew Arnold, which are more piercingly blasphemous than the shrieks of Schopenhauer. Enough we live, and if a life with large results, so little rife, though bearable, seem hardly worth this pomp of worlds, this pain of birth. I know this feeling fills our epoch, and I think it freezes our epoch. For our titanic purposes of faith and revolution, what we need is not the cold acceptance of the world as a compromise, but some way in which we can heartily hate and heartily love it. We do not want joy and anger to neutralize each other and produce a surly contentment. We want a fiercer delight and a fiercer discontent. We have to feel the universe at once as an ogre's castle to be stormed, and yet as our own cottage to which we can return at evening. No one doubts that an ordinary man can get on with this world, but we demand not strength enough to get on with it, but strength enough to get it on. Can he hate it enough to change it, and yet love it enough to think it worth changing? Can he look up at its colossal good without once feeling acquiescence? Can he look up at its colossal evil without once feeling despair? Can he, in short, be at once not only a pessimist and an optimist, but a fanatical pessimist and a fanatical optimist? Is he enough of a pagan to die for the world and enough of a Christian to die to it? In this combination, I maintain it is the rational optimist who fails, the irrational optimist who succeeds. He is ready to smash the whole universe for the sake of itself. I put these things not in their mature logical sequence, but as they came. And this view was cleared and sharpened by an accident of the time. Under the lengthening shadow of Ibsen, an argument arose whether it was not a very nice thing to murder oneself. Grave moderns told us that we must not even say, "poor fellow," of a man who had blown his brains out, since he was an enviable person and had only blown them out because of their exceptional excellence. Mr. William Archer even suggests that in the Golden Age there would be penny in the slot machines by which a man could kill himself for a penny. In all this, I found myself utterly hostile to many who called themselves liberal and humane. Not only is suicide a sin, it is the sin. It is the ultimate and absolute evil, the refusal to take an interest in existence, the refusal to take the oath of loyalty to life. The man who kills a man kills a man. The man who kills himself kills all men. As far as he is concerned, he wipes out the world. His act is worse, symbolically considered, than any rape or dynamite outrage, for it destroys all buildings, it insults all women. The thief is satisfied with diamonds, but the suicide is not. That is his crime. He cannot be bribed even by the blazing stones of the celestial city. The thief compliments the things he steals, if not the owner of them. But the suicide insults everything on earth by not stealing it. He defiles every flower by refusing to live for its sake. There is not a tiny creature in the cosmos at whom his death is not a sneer. When a man hangs himself on a tree, the leaves might fall off in anger and the birds fly away in fury, for each has received a personal affront. Of course, there may be pathetic emotional excuses for the act. There often are for rape, and there almost always are for dynamite. But if it comes to clear ideas and the intelligent meaning of things, then there is much more rational and philosophic truth in the burial at the crossroads and the stake driven through the body than in Mr. Archer's suicidal automatic machines. There is a meaning in burying the suicide apart. The man's crime is different from other crimes, for it makes even crimes impossible. About the same time, I read a solemn flippancy by some free thinker. He said that a suicide was only the same as a martyr. The open fallacy of this helped to clear the question. Obviously, a suicide is the opposite of a martyr. A martyr is a man who cares so much for something outside him that he forgets his own personal life. A suicide is a man who cares so little for anything outside him that he wants to see the last of everything. One wants something to begin, the other wants everything to end. In other words, the martyr is noble. Exactly because, however he renounces the world or execrates all humanity, he confesses this ultimate link with life. He sets his heart outside himself. He dies that something may live. The suicide is ignoble because he has not this link with being. He is a mere destroyer. Spiritually, he destroys the universe. And then I remembered the stake and the crossroads, and the queer fact that Christianity had shown this weird harshness to the suicide. For Christianity had shown a wild encouragement of the martyr. Historic Christianity was accused, not entirely without reason, of carrying martyrdom and asceticism to a point desolate and pessimistic. The early Christian martyrs talked of death with a horrible happiness. They blasphemed the beautiful duties of the body. They smelt the grave afar off like a field of flowers. All this has seemed to many the very poetry of pessimism. Yet there is the stake at the crossroads to show what Christianity thought of the pessimist. Now you see it. Chesterton just answered the question we've been circling the entire time. You don't fix the world by pretending it's fine, and you don't fix the world by deciding it's worthless. The pessimist walks away, the optimist looks away. But Chesterton says there's another way altogether. You don't reform a world you merely tolerate. You don't save a world you secretly despise. You swear allegiance to it, and then you fight for it. That's what he means by an oath. Not a feeling, not a preference, not a mood. An oath. Because once you take the oath, you don't get to quit. You don't get to abandon the world when it hurts, and you don't get to excuse it when it's broken. That's why suicide is the ultimate rejection, because it refuses the oath. And that's why empty optimism is just as dangerous, because it refuses the fight. And this is where Christianity stands alone. It doesn't tell you to escape the world, and it doesn't tell you to accept the world. It tells you to love the world and confront the world. Christ did not abandon the world. He did not excuse it either. He entered it. He loved it. He confronted it. And he went to the cross for it. That is the oath. That is the posture. That is the only position that actually produces change. So the question is not, what do you think about the world? The question is, have you sworn allegiance? Because if you haven't, you will either abandon it or you will lie about it. But if you have, you will fight for it. Christ is King. Hail to the King.